Welcome to The Making Of, the podcast from Swansea University that takes you behind the scenes of remarkable success stories. In each episode, we sit down with extraordinary people to discover how they reached the very top of their fields, the highs, the lows, and lessons they found along the way. I'm Andy Bush, proud Swansea University alumnus, and in this episode, we're joined by Renee Godfrey. Renee is a Welsh surfer, presenter, and documentary filmmaker who earned her BA in anthropology from Swansea University in 2003. Her close connection to the coast has shaped most of her life. Surfing has been a guiding passion ever since, and she has translated that into a career exploring human-nature relationships in film. Her recent credits include Surviving Paradise for Netflix, Hostile Planet for National Geographic, and previously for the BBC, Enchanted Kingdom 3D, Wild Atlantic, and Wild New Zealand. She also co-founded Freeborn Media, a production venture with James Honeybourne of Blue Planet fame, through which she continues to tell stories that highlight our connection to the natural world. Renee, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast. I mean, let's start by saying human beings need stories. We need to be told stories. It's good to tell stories, isn't it?
It's good, and it's also so important now, kind of more than ever, I think, especially the kinds of stories that we tell, we at Freeborn Media, in terms of, voicing issues from around the globe about how amazing nature is, but also how important and precious it is.
I mean, as we sit here in 2025, what's the kind of current state of play in terms of humankind's relationship with the natural world? Are we getting better or worse as custodians of this planet, Renee?
Oh, I'd really like to think that we're getting better, but I fear that, especially at the moment with global politics the way that they are, those of us who believe we're fighting the good fight with the right messages have to continue to do so. Now more than ever, really. It's so important that we can tell stories about the natural world, make people fall in love with wildlife around our planet. And, because I always think if you can make people fall in love and care about nature, then they can have a deeper understanding of it and hopefully an awareness to then, make a difference.
So I guess with what you do, you must see the highs of some incredible, visions that you've witnessed, things that you've witnessed on planet Earth, but also see some of the lows as well. Is it a bit of a balance? Is it 50-50, or are there more highs than lows in terms of the things that you've seen?
I think the things I've seen over the years, I mean, yeah, I've traveled the world to kind of, some of the most remote and hostile corners of it, to film wildlife spectacles and then to incorporate those into stories and films. And that's very exciting. And there's lots of highs involved with that. There are always the realities. I think probably when I started my career 20 years ago, we were just starting to get whispers of seasonal change, and perhaps say the wildebeest migration across the Serengeti it might be a little bit later this year. We're not sure when the rains are coming. Suddenly those seasonal variations, which are always there and always have been there to a greater or an extent, suddenly things have become a lot more unpredictable. And certainly when we were making Hostile Planet, we were making that at a point where environmental change was happening. The climate was seemingly more hostile at that point, which was, I think, probably that was about 10 years ago than any other time in human history in terms of environmental hostilities. Deserts getting drier, equatorial regions getting hotter, polar regions getting warmer. Just change. So and then how the wildlife reacts or has to react as is dictated by that.
I mean, not wishing to get political at all, but it's not that long ago that President Trump has stood in front of the United Nations and said that, climate change or global warming is the biggest con job in the history of the world. I mean, how do you react to that, seeing what you've seen and in your field of work?
Those of us who believe in the important messages of climate and the environment have to keep on keeping on, and hopefully that the messages will get through. That we've just got to keep on, as I say, more, and it's more important now than ever before.
Did you ever think though that raising awareness about climate change would have to be such a battle to type of put your point of view across. You just kind of expect that to be a given, right? So we've got the science to prove this, so let's try and do something about it rather than convincing people that it's like a hoax or something,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I can remember when I started in university, there were the beginnings of conversations, or certainly as far as undergrad students were going, about climate change um, and these global shifts in climatic patterns and things, and thinking, gosh, yeah, wow, these maps look really interesting. And now, obviously, it's a given. I've got a 7-year-old son who we talk about this a lot, actually, and the realities of it, but also remembering that there are lots of things we can all do to help as well.
Well, let's go back to the beginning, Renee. Did you always know what you wanted to do when you were a child? Like, the documentary maker isn't one of those usual career templates they thrust upon you like a chef or a post person when you're a child. Did you always know what you wanted to do?
No, I had absolutely no idea. I think I wanted to be a sort of explorer and adventurer as a child, and then I stumbled upon anthropology when I was studying at an international school in Wales, a place called Atlantic College, where there were a load of my kind of co-year students were going off to study social anthropology. I thought, well, what's that? And then I kind of learned that it was the study of other people's cultures and understanding the cultures of others, and um, seeing worlds through the eyes of others and understanding them. And I thought, that sounds amazing. And it just so happened Swansea had a brilliant department and with fantastic staff. And so, along I went, and continued to fall deeper and deeper in love with anthropology, through my studies there. Um, but when I left Swansea, I thought, well, what on earth am I going to do now? And I've always also loved storytelling. Obviously surfing has been a big part of my life. So actually, straight after Swansea, I went to live in France, the southwest coast of France, for a while. And I was fortunate that I could, surf a bit, do a little bit of work here and there. But after a couple of months of doing that, I thought, well, I kind of need to do something else with my life. I just graduated. It was the summer of fun was coming to an end. So I thought, well, I like writing and I like telling stories. I'm going to get into magazine journalism. So I started writing for some surf magazines and some travel magazines, and then I thought, well, I'm doing this, but I'm a bit of a fraud, really, because I'm not a journalist as such. So I decided I thought I would get some sort of academic qualification in journalism. So I applied to Cardiff School of Journalism, which happened to be, at the time, one of the best places in Europe to study print journalism. So I thought, great, I'll do that. I can still go surfing at home because surfing's always been a big driver for me, and that's what I'll do. But just before I started at CJS, Cardiff Journalism School, the BBC in Cardiff were making a series, or putting together a series, called Tribe, with a presenter, Bruce Parry, and they were looking for some anthropologists to come on board the team just for little brief, almost sort of like internship, work experience type stints for sort of 3-4 weeks, to help with some of the academic background to putting the series together and finding stories of Indigenous communities that were doing things that would be visually and culturally interesting for Bruce to join in with. So along I went to BBC Wales under the protective wing of a wonderful series producer called Steve Robinson, who was a fabulous filmmaker and also a surfer, which is nice because worlds tend to collide. He's also from Swansea, from the Gower, and I started doing my work experience at the BBC, finished that, and had some really good advice from a friend of my father who worked in radio, funnily enough, and she'd said, when you go to do this bit of work experience, make yourself indispensable. So I thought, right, okay, so I'm just going to work really hard, try and do everything that's needed and more. And I did. And then I said goodbye to the team at BBC Wales, who were a fab young team, and 2 weeks later, started my course at Cardiff School of Journalism. And then about 3.5 weeks into that course, the BBC rang me up and said, would you like a job?
Oh, wow.
So I was then faced with the dilemma of, well, I've just started and I've just paid for my journalism course, and I'm now being offered a job, and the BBC could only offer me a 3-month contract. So I thought, oh, that's a tricky one to navigate. So I thought long and hard about it, chatted to a few people about it, and decided to go with the offer from the BBC. So I left my journalism course, much to lots of people's surprise, and went headfirst into the job at the BBC, hoping that if I continued to make myself indispensable, I would then 3 months would become a 6-month contract, would become a 12-month contract. And lo and behold, within 2 months, I was packing my bags to go off to the Omo Valley in Ethiopia. I was doing camera courses to learn to learn how to shoot film, to learn how to record sound, to learn how to take time lapses of, stars at night or sunsets over acacia bushes. And off I went and never looked back.
That's incredible. And it's really fascinating that you should say about the whole nearly doing the journalism course. That was the same for me. I wanted to do like print journalism, but then I didn't know how to do shorthand. There was a lot made of shorthand and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting that you can get into the world that you're in without necessarily having to do the journalism. So people listening to this who might feel like they have to do that course, there are other ways to do it, I guess.
You're right. There are so many other ways. And I have lots of conversations with lots of people who, it's a really attractive industry, right? Working in wildlife filmmaking and, getting to travel all around the world and see wonderful things and tell important stories. So it's, there's lots of people that want to get into it. And there is no single route path to get in. I think there are, nearly everybody I know who I work with have arrived where they're at through different pathways, be it through, degrees in zoology or biology, or not even, just a lot of hands-on experience and, an ability to tell a story and an ability to have a deep understanding of the natural world and what goes on. So yeah, you can get in any which way, but I think there are definitely key things that you do need, which, like I say, is kind of this passion for storytelling and an ability to spot a good story and to tell it, and belief in what you do and the messaging that you want to communicate.
But one of the biggest stresses I always think is that transition from A-levels or college to university. You've got all the different brochures and everywhere looks great. What was your criteria? And you mentioned it, you alluded to it a little bit earlier on, but what was your kind of criteria on that search for a university, and why was Swansea such a good fit for you, do you think?
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming. It's a confusing time, that, sort of finishing A-levels, or I did the international baccalaureate and thinking, where on earth do I go? And I just thought, well, I'm going to be spending a good couple of years studying, and so I know I want to do something that I really feel excited by and passionate about. And then I also wanted to go surfing lots and not be in a big city. For me personally, I've always tried to live very close to the sea, and have access to it regularly. It's still important to me now. And Swansea had at the time, a really great anthropology department with 3 of the coolest members of staff in the academic world that I've met to date. Professor Reg Byron, who was just this fabulous, fabulous man, and then Felicia Hughes Freeland, who was a wonderful, slightly eccentric anthropologist, and then Margaret Kennar, who I think is still living in Swansea, I believe. So that, the academic staff also had a sway, and I think if you've got an academic team like they had at Swansea, who are deeply passionate and a bit kind of like a bit out there, it just brings the subject matter to life. But Swansea's, is a special place. It's Wales, which is where I'm from, and it's where my heart is. It's where my family are from. But it's also, you've got the Gower. You've got all that the Gower offers in terms of walking, swimming, surfing, exploring. You've got Mumbles, which is really fun. it's really close to Cardiff to get, to then, which is a great jumping off point to go down to the southwest and go up into the mountains, into Brecon. It's kind of got it all, really.
Well, let's talk about surfing. Obviously, like you just mentioned, the coast was a big thing for you. Tell us about your journey into surfing and how that kind of panned out.
Well, my father, it was an ex-Commonwealth and Olympic swimmer. So I grew up, and my mum was in quite heavily involved in athletics and then in sport in general. So I grew up surrounded by sport, and in particular swimming. I did a lot of swimming as a youngster in Cardiff, and my mum worked for the Sports Council for Wales at the time. One of her governing bodies was Welsh Surfing, and she had to go along to, once a year, she had to go along to some of their events. And so I would get dragged along in the car, often up to North Wales, to see sort of Welsh kayaking, or fortuitously to Brittany one year to watch a surfing competition. And I was just absolutely mesmerized. As I said, done a lot of swimming in pools, a bit of swimming in the sea with beach lifeguards, and got taken under the wing of the Welsh surfing team, and in particular two really wonderful people who are still involved heavily in Welsh surfing, Hugh John and Linda Sharp. And they just took me because I guess because I could swim, so I had sort of strong shoulders and confidence in the water. They let me have a go, and I could do it. And there weren't that many girls at the time surfing, or there were some, but not many. So I just kind of got chucked in with all the boys, and had a baptism of fire of, just going along and paddling out in any surf, because I just had to join in with everyone and learn pretty quickly. So that's sort of my journey in, and I quite quickly, once I'd started surfing, I started competing, and started doing well, which was great and great fun. And then the rest kind of played out. And it was great through my studies. As I say, I went to an international school in Wales, a place called Atlantic College, which was on the coast. So I could combine kind of my studies and surfing at the same time, and then going to Swansea as well. It was the perfect combination for both.
So it must be amazing, really, to have a situation where you can be studying and working quite hard, but have that kind of release valve that Swansea gives you as a location where you can just, grab your wetsuit and surfboard and just get away from it all. That's a good thing when you're a student, isn't it? Having that other area of kind of release.
Oh, it's so important, I think. Just to have, exactly, just to get out and be in the natural environment, and paddle out in a hailstorm. It's sort of, it makes any worries about, I couldn't get the papers I needed to write that essay, or I didn't do so well just then. It kind of it quashes any worries and concerns. Paddling out into the sea just is so good for us, for mind and body, and it's just a leveler, I've always thought. And being in Swansea, really, it was a great balance, actually. I mean, I was a very boring student when I was in Swansea University. I didn't really go out and party much. I just surfed a lot. I swam a lot. They just built the new 50-meter pool just as I was finishing up, so I would swim in that fabulous pool, which would help with surfing. And then I just surfed my brains out and studied. I don't think I really went to the students' union much. I maybe went and had a few coffees in the coffee shop, and then I just went surfing.
Well, there you go. It's what you love. I mean, I lived in a house full of surfers in Mumbles when I was at university there, and they used to tell me a lot about the etiquette of going surfing with the locals there, in terms of is it dropping in on someone's wave, Renee? Is that the correct terminology?
That is the correct terminology. Yeah, clearly your housemates have taught you well. Yeah. There's definitely etiquette, especially when you're learning. Well, and even when you're not learning, if you paddle out there, if somebody's in position on an unbroken wave, they have priority.
Yeah.
And that's important. And in places like the Gower, there are surfing spots that are more, where the waves are perhaps of a reasonable quality, say Langland Bay, where the waves are pretty good. The locals are very good, and there is, I wouldn't say a hierarchy, but just an etiquette and a respect, which I feel even now. When I paddle out, if I paddle out at Lagland Bay and I haven't seen people for years, I'll get all the hellos, but I will also just take my time and wait and make sure everybody has their wave, and then I'll go for some waves as well.
You must have witnessed a similar thing, monkeys on a tree at some point in some kind of jungle or something somewhere. I think in terms of a hierarchy and people paying their respects, etc. as well. So any advice to students who want to pursue a course but also want to do other stuff, have other interests at the same time? How do you stop one kind of slightly overtaking the other?
That's a good question, and probably one we're all still trying to work out now in life, isn't it? I think it's about balance and making sure you've got your priorities clear, remembering that you're there for one main reason, which is to work hard, but also, you want to be able to make the most of what's on your doorstep when you're in Swansea, and interact with the natural environment around you, and have fun as well. And that's, if all work and no play makes for a dull day, doesn't it? Really.
So, let's talk about anthropology. You just mentioning it there about your love for that course. Do you think anthropology is one of those subjects that sometimes is a little bit overlooked in terms of people choosing a course to do at university, maybe?
Yeah, maybe because it's not immediately known. Because I guess, I don't know if you can study it at A level. I know you can at IB, but yeah, it's one of the more unknown subjects. But I think it's, yeah, I guess it's not as mainstream as, say, English or history or biology, perhaps. Um, but yeah, I think it has a reasonable following, anthropology. Especially now with sort of, even just looking at kind of the anthropology of sport and the culture around sport and fanaticism with things like football. That anthropology is all around us, all the time. Us, the world needing to have more of an understanding of each other is pretty up there with important things, isn't it?
Totally. And we've got a 16-year-old, been talking to her about what she wants to do when she was going to go to university in the future. And I feel like younger people now are, I'd say, less likely to do sometimes a course that might be, I don't mean frivolous or a bit more of like a curveball course, because they feel like they need to make money because of it. Because, obviously it's much more of an investment than when I was at university. You kind of put your student loan in the bank and kind of partied for a few years, where it's a completely different ball game now for people going to university. So do you feel like, some people now feel a bit of a pressure to make sure they're doing what would be considered to be a more traditional, direct route towards having a good job type course?
Um, yes and no. I was having this conversation with my 22-year-old stepson on the weekend, who's about to start a master's this week, and I think now more than ever there comes the need for huge focus on what you choose to study, because of the cost implications for everyone, because of the debt involved. We all know universities, it's getting more and more expensive for everybody. But again, I think this comes back to, the conversation we were having about getting into an industry in my journey into TV and filmmaking. I think unless it's a very clear vocation, I still, the advice I give is even if it's a course that's a little bit out there, if you're really deeply passionate about it, you will, through that passion comes hard work and interest, and therefore throwing yourself into it and coming out with a degree in something that you've been really eager to learn about will inherently mean you in theory you'll do well, and be passionate to continue to communicate that in whatever form that may take, whether it's postgrad or whether it's going into something more vocational. But yeah, I think it's good that there's the need to be really focused on what you want to do. But I still think, yeah, my advice may, and rightly or wrongly, I think, I don't know, my parents just always told me to follow my heart, and if you do that with enough vigor, good things will come.
And talking about following your heart, you were talking, so lovingly about the lecturers that you had at your time at Swansea University and the the long-lasting effect they've had on you. When you kind of close your eyes and think about your course, your anthropology course that you did at Swansea University, what can you kind of picture and see? Can you remember like the lecture halls? Can you remember the tutorials, or what kind of visions come into your mind?
So I made my first ever film when I was at Swansea University as part of Felicia Hughes Freeland's visual anthropology module, and I made it with a friend who was on the course with me, a guy called Joe, um, and we had a brilliant time. We made our first film about there was an old man called John who used to swim every single day at Langland Bay and in the sea. So this is before all this kind of cold water swimming became fashionable. And he had had polio as a child, and he would swim every day, come rain or shine, or like as I say, December, January, February, through the coldest months of the year, whether there was snow and ice or gales, he'd be out there. And the reason he'd go in is because the cold water would help the pain of his legs from where he'd had polio as a youngster. So we filmed a sort of ritualistic practice that he was doing, and we turned that into a film. So that's probably one of my most vivid memories. I remember I wanted us to get a shot of like arriving down at Langland, and at the time I had an Astra estate which had a kind of like manual sunroof. So I'd said to Joe, "Come on, Joe, I've got a really good idea. I'll drive down the hill. You stand up out of the sunroof with the camera, and like I'll try and go slow." So we had this kind of, almost like in our very young, naive minds, it's like a bit of almost like an aerial shot, arriving down at Langland, and it was a great experience because we got to plan it, direct it, shoot it, and it obviously do a big interview with John while he talked about it, and he then voiced the film, and yeah, that's something that I really clearly remember.
And there's always that kind of strange thing of, is it luck or is it chance that you get connected with something that then takes you on this kind of great adventure, or do you make your own luck in those situations? That vital few months after you finish university and deciding what to do. What was your kind of insight on that, and how did you kind of approach it?
I think, I approached it just by being really open to conversations, connections, and then opportunities. And yeah, I think, I decided I finished my course. I got a first. I thought, okay, I'll go to France. I'll have a nice time for a month and surf. And then I thought, right now, what can I do? Because I'm going to get bored quite quickly, and I need to use my brain, which is how I got into starting to write. And I was quite, I was well placed I was surfing a lot competitively at that time. So I was well placed within the surf world of surfing to write for surf magazines here in France and in America. So again, but I made those opportunities happen. I just kind of sat down and thought, right, if this is what I want to do, how can I make it happen? And who can I speak to make it happen? And, I spoke to some publications, and they were like, well, unless we can see some of your writing, that has actually been published, we're not going to do anything. So, I was writing for the local little seaside magazine where I'd grown up surfing in Porthcawl, and then came bits and bobs for magazines, and then came, bits and bobs for brands. I was connected with surfing brands, so I got invited by Billabong at the time to go and do some trips with some of their sponsored surfers, and then film, and then write about those individuals and the trips that they went on, and then just so then think, and then that all gathered momentum, and then the more I wrote, the more I was published, the more I had to show people, the more opportunities came.
And then, do you think it's a good plan if someone's listening to this and they're about to start at the university and they're kind of planning their roadmap through to the future? Is it good to be really single-minded about specifically what job you want to do at the end of the day, or does that is it worth being a bit more broad and saying, well, if this doesn't work out, I can maybe try and do something like this or something different?
I think a broad approach it can be a really good one. I think it totally depends on what industry or world one's trying to get into. Certainly where my industry's concerned, I think the key to making wildlife films is to have an understanding and a respect for the natural world and a desire to tell stories about it. But that doesn't mean that you have to have a super expensive camera and go out and make short films by yourself. You can go and tell stories through radio pieces. You can go and write for magazines. You can go and film something on your phone and edit it and put it on Vimeo or YouTube or whatever. It's about communication and storytelling in its broadest form, where my industry's concerned. So I think having a clear eye on goals or what you're passionate and keen about, but also being open is probably worthwhile. But I think, again, if we're talking about medicine, then that's a different conversation again, isn't it? So it depends where people's passions lie.
And what would you say has been your best career decision so far, Renee?
I'd say probably not staying doing my postgrad in print journalism and taking that job at the BBC all those hundreds of years ago, it seems. I'd say that was a pretty good decision, because that then set me up, and it was a big gamble at the time. But it was one that led to me being where I am here today.
And it's important to underline that, reaching the level that you have isn't easy. Has there been a period of your career that you would cite as kind of being your toughest period in your working life?
There've been lots of challenges, definitely. But I say all of those with a smile. I was making Surviving Paradise, a wildlife feature doc based in the Okavango Delta, just as COVID hit. So we had to, worked with a great team out in Botswana, and we had to box very cleverly, very quickly to carry on making the film. And we did, and it was a huge team effort. And we had to think on our toes. I set up an edit suite here at this desk. My editor set up an edit suite at his desk in Bristol, and we had an edit suite in Botswana in a tent in the middle of the Delta. And I think it was every 12 days, a drive would be sent over, kind of couriered over to the UK, and we would then get that drive put into our edit suites, and we would look through the footage, give feedback, all the things that we would normally do when we were away in the field, we couldn't do. But we still, we managed. So we were able to then I was able to give direction and feedback and suggestions, and as stories developed or as characters evolved through the film, so and that was not easy. But we did it. So things like that, there've definitely been challenges. I've filmed and don't get me wrong, these going away to film for Human Planet or for Tribe or for any of the wildlife films I've made, you're camping in the wilderness. It's not glamorous, at all. There's often, when I filmed in Ethiopia during big droughts, so we just didn't have access to water, and you're in the desert for weeks on end. So you kind of get to have one jerry can full of water for a wash every couple of days, just to sort of rinse off and hope that a dust storm doesn't immediately coat you as you walk out of your shower tarp tent, which has definitely happened to me several times. Or when I was making Enchanted Kingdom, which was a 3D wildlife feature film, it was a coming together of two worlds, one of 3D filmmaking and quite high-end 3D filmmaking, and then our wildlife documentary teams. So it was a merging of two worlds, and that there were tough times then, because we were taking people who'd come off, say, the filming set of Life of Pi, and taking them to the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia, which is the hottest, most hostile place I've ever worked in my entire life. And we were sleeping on these. I'm sure some fancy shop would sell these as like some kind of beautiful indigenous piece of furniture, but we're sleeping on these kind of like bamboo little like a day bed, but they're low to the ground, just in our sleeping bags, and we're just all lined out in the desert, um, with no cover or anything because it's 40 degrees day and night.
Wow.
No breeze, no change in temperature, just nothing. Then you've got a massive generator next to your head that's going all night because you've got to charge the batteries and charge camera kit and offload media, and so that's pretty hardcore in itself. But to be motivating a team who've just come from a very nice set, and where it's clean and neat and tidy and shiny and not dusty and not hot and not full of sulfuric fumes from botanical and and camp food, then there are always challenges, but they're part of the fun of it, and they're part of the rich tapestry of making these films, I always think.
I was going to ask, what's the most in danger you've been, Renee, in what you've done? Have you been in any kind of real danger, do you think?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I've been charged by elephants, and I understand why those elephants charged us, because they were under threat from poachers, and that poachers had killed an elephant a few weeks before when I was in Kenya, or in filming in Ethiopia, actually, in the Danakil Depression. We were on the border with Eritrea, so we had to have armed guards with us, with pretty heavy weaponry as a sort of just in case, because a few months before, I think some Italian and German tourists had been kidnapped. So there have been risks in lots of places in different ways. I've gone for a wild pee in the bush and someone's shouted "mamba." There's a black mamba 2 meters away from me, so I've had to run out of the bush. So there's scorpions in your socks. There've been lots of craziness, but all part of the excitement.
And then, you've mentioned it a few times actually in terms of working with a team or working with other people, being adaptable and getting things done. Is that something, someone's listening to this or about to maybe start a university course at Swansea? It's not just how you individually work your way through this academic adventure. You need to, I guess it's good and important to want to work with your fellow students and the people who are on your course as well, because that's like the teamwork element of things.
Absolutely, and understanding that everybody can bring something different, and that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and kind of learning to see those and understand them about oneself and those that you're working with is a hugely valid and useful skill to have in life, I think.
And then, you mentioned the lecturers earlier on, but is there one person in your life that's had the biggest influence on your career, would you say?
On my career, yeah, there is actually. It's two people. It's a couple. A couple called Mark Diebel and Victoria Stone, and they're fellow wildlife filmmakers, and absolute legends in our industry. And I first worked with them and first met them on Human Planet. We worked together on 2 stories actually. One, we filmed an amazing story on a rubbish dump in Mombasa, where humans and egrets and storks and cows and dogs were all kind of living together off the rubbish dump. It was extraordinary, really, and we filmed with some amazing human characters there who've made it their home. And yeah, so that's when I kind of first met them, and then we went up into northern Kenya together to film elephants with the Samburu communities up there, and that was such an amazing adventure. But they probably taught me more than anyone the skills of storytelling and understanding, just how to tell a story, how to break it down, the importance of story, and the importance of ecology, and kind of weaving ecology into all the films that we now make. So yeah, if you haven't seen any of their films, they are extraordinary. They made a film that's on Apple at the moment called The Elephant Queen, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film.
And then when you look back at your career, would you have done anything differently at all, Renee?
Oh Gosh, that's a really good question. Um, I I don't know if I would, I mean, I feel like, everything's, yeah, I kind of I don't want to jinx it really.
Yeah, I agree. And you've filmed some amazing things, in the natural world. What would you say is the most incredible natural sight that you have filmed and witnessed?
Filming gorillas in Rwanda was very special. Um, Not least just because you feel such a connection to them because they are so like us. Um, and even more so, when I was filming them, I didn't have a child, but now I have, now I have. I've got a little boy, and just the interactions. I can remember when we were filming them in Rwanda, the interactions between mums and even babies or mothers and youngsters. And the youngsters are being cheeky and messing around and twirling up in the branches, and then kind of fall to the ground with a thud. And and mum will come over, or even worse, grandma will come over and give them a bit of a scolding. And it's just funny. And then and then seeing the sheer power of a silverback is something that will always stay with me, I think, forever, because it's just, it's the smell, it's the texture of the skin. Looking at gorillas' hands is an amazing thing, because they have all the same wrinkles in their hands and on the backs of their hands and their knuckles that we do, and fingernails, and that dexterity. It's just fascinating. So that felt like an amazing thing to do. And we were there for several weeks. We would only ever have very short windows of time each day with the gorillas, which again made it feel even more special because it's a very fortunate position to be in. Um, so yeah, I think filming gorillas is definitely up there. I love elephants. They're my favorite animals. And any time I've spent filming any elephants and just with elephants is always absolutely magical. And again, you feel such a connection to them. Um, and they're so sentient, and they're just so knowing that you're there, and they feel your vibe.
Yeah.
So if you're slightly edgy and you really want to get that shot, and you just need them to you're just waiting for them to do something, forget it. You just have to really, and that's something that I feel that Mark Diebel and Vicky Stone definitely taught me, is just having that, just being really calm and just having that patience, and just letting nature play out in front of you that's something that they definitely taught me.
And then has there been a shift for you going from kind of being part of a production to, say, with Freeborn Media where you're making things? Has that been a kind of change in your career, and that you're kind of like almost organizationally putting things together rather than being the one that's necessarily out there with the camera yourself?
Yeah, it has. It has been a shift, but a really welcome one, because I've got a young family, and life's in a different place to what it was when I was in my 20s and 30s. And I'm just as passionate as ever about telling stories. But now it's also about sort of, you know, nurturing talent, coming, helping support the next guard kind of thing. I work really closely with our teams to come up with new ideas and to still shape the films that we make or the series that we make. And I still feel that they're kind of, we do a reasonable job of kind of combining bold storytelling with scientific integrity, but in a way it's sort of more, I guess when I was younger, I used to jump in and make other people's ideas. I'd arrive and get a job on a series, but a lot of the thought had already been done before I'd get there. And then I would get given a film, which I could then craft as my own. Whereas now it feels, yeah, we get to shape things a little bit more as I'm the development lead for our company Freeborn. So I kind of oversee the strategy of what we make, and shape the story direction, and hope that people want us to make them and continue to make those sorts of films.
And what's next for you guys? What thing are you working on at the moment, and what are you kind of excited about?
I'm really excited about the series that we're currently making. So we're working with National Geographic and Disney, and we're making The Real Finding Nemo,
Oh, wow.
which is lots of fun, and lots of very exciting storytelling going on with it. So that's currently, we're editing that at the moment, and it feels like a lovely coming together of lots of, it's still, even now after all the films we've made, and when I say we, I mean James and I, who's the co-founder of Freeborn with me, and also my husband. You know, even after all the films we've both made, and he made Blue Planet 2 and Our Oceans on Netflix, and even now it still feels there are fresh approaches and new, fun, exciting ways of telling stories. And I think that's the beauty of our industry, is it's ever evolving. There's always new science coming out, there's new exciting discoveries being made, and important ones too. And then we can challenge ourselves with, okay, how do we tell those stories? How do we bring them to life more? How do we get the details from this scientific paper that a few people have read, to get it into people's homes, so that we all have an understanding of it.
And then finally, Renee, if someone was listening to this podcast feeling a little bit overwhelmed, considering plotting their course at Swansea University, what would you say to them?
Have a cup of tea, sit down calmly. And I'm a great advocate for writing things down. So whenever I'm at a sort of crossroads with things, I get a piece of paper and I just write down all the thoughts and all the possibilities, and then try and kind of muddle my way through finding a path through it, and just taking a few deep breaths. And if that doesn't work, then I think talking to people who've been there, who've done it, or who might even be there now, and also remembering that the staff there are all fabulous. I mean, the staff now today are a different group of people to the ones that I knew when I was there. But I had some great. I mean, they weren't officially mentors, but at the time, the head of sport, Stan Adicott, was brilliant in terms of supporting me with surfing and training for surfing and things. Whilst also knowing that I needed space from that to study. And, I can really remember the staff actually were great people to talk to. And I think remembering that the staff there, the academic staff, are approachable, and they're all there because they love their subject and they love what they do. That's why you stay in academia. I think, it's because you're really eager to share all of your enthusiasm that you've got. And so, yeah, talking to the staff is a good one too.
Amazing. Listen, thank you so much. Thank you for telling us about your Swansea experience and how that shaped the person you are today. And we wish you continued success. Renee, Godfrey, thank you so much.
Thank you.